Now, everyone, get comfortable. You have a great talk to look forward to. This is Denise Jacobs.
No promises.
I first saw Denise speak maybe 4 or 5 years ago in Italy. The one that really stands out to me is an amazing talk she did in Nottingham around 3 years ago, which completely blew my mind. It was such a unique talk.
It was.
Denise is one of us. She gets us. She's a veteran of the web and tech industry. But now she's focusing much more on creativity and trying to improve our creativity and our creative productivity. She's even writing a book. So please put your hands together for the wonderful Denise Jacobs.
How is everybody doing this afternoon? How are you feeling? Good? Has anybody's brains melted out of their ears yet? Okay. So for those of you who are like, if I see another line of code, it's going to get ugly. There is no code in this talk. There's a lot of very pretty pictures, in my humble opinion. So this is kind of like your brain break to think about something else and kind of formulate lay down some new neural tracks, potentially. So I have this talk that I put together because I felt like there was, a lot of times it's really easy to they call it in the United States, they say that you get lost in the sauce. Right? So that you're going along in your career and you're going along with your job and you're making choices, but sometimes it's hard to know whether you're making choices that are really supportive of you or not, and sometimes you find out later on, oh wow, I kind of wish I had made a different choice, and I wish I had maybe like a rubric or a framework that I could work from to help me make choices. And so I came up with this idea about this, and I call it infinite possibilities. So if you haven't seen my Twitter handle anywhere, it's Denise Jacobs, you know where we are. And if you want to use a hashtag for this, it's infinite possible. And the slides are actually already up on the web. They're on SlideShare and also on my website. So you can use this URL to get to the slides, and I will also tweet that URL, and I'll also show that slide again at the end of the presentation so you don't have to get anxious about not getting it. So, good to see y'all. Very funny little anecdote just for a moment. So last week I was in Melbourne, Australia to keynote UX Australia. And I'm walking along, going somewhere, and I'm walking through down the street, and bam! I see this, and I was like, no way! I'm going to be in Switzerland next week. I'm taking pictures. And then, just in case you didn't know, I love Zurich. I love coming here. When Matthias called me, and he was like, hey, please come and keynote. And I was like, yes, of course, because I love Zurich, and I love coming to this conference, and I actually was a little grouchy last year when I didn't come, so I'm like happy we're kind of making up the balance of the universe. Now, hi. Oh, sorry. Hi, Mom. So just a lot of people kind of are just like, why is this woman coming and talking about creativity? And just like Laura said, I used to be a front-end dev. I used to be like all of y'all. And then something magical happened, and that is that I woke up to what I actually was supposed to do. Now, you guys know that you're in this industry, you're doing this, so I'm going to tell you kind of some of the things that pushed me over the edge and pushed me over to the side of becoming a creativity evangelist, aside from the epiphany that I had. So clients can be special, right? It can be interesting. You're working on a client project, and the problem with being a person who's written a book and is kind of in expert land, or allegedly in expert land, is that you have a lot of knowledge that people don't give a shit about, right? You have a lot of knowledge, well, you could do this, this, and this, and we have to make sure that it gracefully degrades, and they're just like, I just want a website. and I want to pay you 2 cents for it. And I was like, whoo, wow. And because of that, my project started feeling onerous and burdensome rather than enjoyable. And then, to add insult to injury, there's these people. Y'all know who these are. The only person who's not here is Leah Veru. When I would see other people in the industry doing amazing things, designing amazing things like Andy does, and coming up with God knows what for Vitaly hacks and this and that and the other thing, and then Harry at the time was about 10 years old when he started doing CSS wizardry, which was like, you know, an embarrassment to me. I was just like, wow, I'm like in my 40s and I can't handle it. And then Leia was like, you know, like 12. And I was just like, whew, I think I need to tap out. I need to tap out of the industry and do something else. But really, what it boiled down to was that my true love really is speaking and teaching and conducting trainings. And when I realized that at the end of the day, I don't really care what you make. I don't care if you make a website. I don't care if you make apps. I don't care if you build a business. I don't care if you're coming up with content strategy or designing a UX interface. I don't care what you make. What I care about is that the process is enjoyable and that the process is flow and that the process helps you get to where you need to be and helps you express what it is that you came to this planet to do. That's what I care about. And so that's why I actually started my consulting business where I go and I do this stuff and I go into companies and I also do coachings and trainings and whatnot. We can talk about that later. So basically what the upshot of all that is I have much respect for all of you in this room and all the stuff that you do. And so I'm going to give you this talk to help you potentially do what you do better. So, does anybody know the significance of these numbers, aside from the fact that it's actually my birth date? Remember that later. In November, I want to be like, remember? Does anybody know the significance of the numbers? Yeah! And then Andy, great spoiler, thanks Andy. So the Fibonacci, I will get into that a little bit later, just a little bit of a teaser. So creativity, these days, people talk about, you probably hear creativity all the time, and I don't know about you, but you might be getting sick of it, like, oh my God, another thing about creativity. Because creativity these days is like super in and super fashionable, and it's like the new black. It goes with everything. But it's actually deeper than that, right? In 2010, IBM did a study, and they asked a bunch of CEOs what they thought the most important skill that CEOs needed for like the next 5 years. And overwhelmingly, they said creativity. Fast forward a little bit later, Time magazine in the United States did a poll, and they asked people at their jobs, and they asked them, what's the most important characteristic, the most important quality that you're looking for in people that you work with, in your colleagues, in your peers? And over compassion, humor, ambition, thankfully over beauty, over intelligence even, creativity was overwhelmingly the most important characteristic and quality that people sought in the people that they worked with. And then a professor at the MIT School of Management did a study, and they did a research paper on why developers do what they do. And they found that the overwhelming motivating factor for all of these developers was creativity. That's what motivate them to achieve and to keep going and to try new things. Andy said yesterday morning that the web should be a vibrant medium for creative expression. But the problem is, I was like, is that my phone? Hold on for a moment. I have a sneaking suspicion that that is my phone, and I do not want to be distracted by any sounds of any pings. I meant to do that earlier. Andy said this yesterday morning, and that's great. I actually fully agree with that. The problem is that we all start off, I believe, being creative. And then at some point in time in our lives, we lose it. And this is what I like to think of as water, as what surrounds us. So there's a little story that goes something like this. Two fish are swimming along in the water, and an elder fish swims by them and says, "How's it going, ladies? How's the water?" And they go and they swim by, and one of them turns to the other one and goes, "What's water?" Yes. And similarly, I feel like we grow up in an environment where, how many of you guys have kids? Right? How many of you guys have got kids and the kid draws something, no matter what it is, you praise them. "Oh my God, that's amazing." You put it up on the refrigerator or up on the wall or you frame it, right? This goes on up until a certain point. Most children, if you ask them, "Are you creative?" will raise their hands. They've done a study, 5-year-olds. If you ask 5-year-olds, "Are you creative?" they'll be like, "Me, yes, me." They go back to those same children 10 years later, 11 years later, when they're 15 and 16. When they're 5, 80% of the children will say, "I'm creative." When they're 15 and 16, 20% of the children will say they're creative. We have it, and then we lose it. The problem is, with that, is that whether or not you're a designer or a developer, the fact of the matter is that you are powerfully creative. And just to kind of drive this home, let's think about this for a moment. And I actually would love to hear from you. Here are some of the things that I think of as the gifts of designers, but I am open to suggestions. Masters of strategic simplification can translate complex information and data into accessible visuals. Evoke emotion, like the examples that Andy gave from the magazine yesterday. Provoke thought, ditto. Make the mundane beautiful. Can you think of any other gifts, natural talents that designers have? What? Ask stupid questions. That's great. What else? Oh, come on, you guys. Now your brains are completely melted. I hope. What else? What else are designers really good at? Good taste. What? Exactly. What else? Yes, questioning the existing and questioning the status quo. So, not to leave others of you out of this, gifts of front-end developers. This is what I'm thinking. Passion for accuracy, analytical, learn quickly, problem solving, curiosity, critical thinking. What else? What else? You guys are like, "Yeah, that covers it." Multitasking. I actually have a thing about multitasking, but we'll talk about it in a minute. What else? Yes, but task switching. Yes, definitely. What else? Flexibility. What else? Top ramen is a very important skill to have. Lost that skill sometime around the age of 19. What else? Top ramen, we'll leave with top ramen. It's strong. So, as designers, as developers, as UX people, as anything other that I haven't covered, who may be represented here, you are in this amazing position. You literally design and build and guide the web. I mean, think about that for a moment. And then we have people in here who are like literally telling you how to do things in the best way, right? So I feel like, given all of that, it's time for us to value ourselves, right? And to really value, really embrace what it is that we're good at and really take that and use that to move forward. Mary Poppendick, who is an agile trainer, works a lot with developers, says that the new scarcity is the time, energy, and brain power of bright, creative people. So you guys here, all of you, are really in demand. You guys are actually a scarce and valuable resource. So given that, you may not have thought that, though, in your career. You may not have thought that when you were making choices about the next job to do or the next thing to do. And so I'm going to try to encourage you during this talk to actually start doing that. The future has many paths and many choices, so you need to choose wisely. So let's kind of think about some ways that we can move forward. It starts with one. And so again, Andy, thank you very much for the setup. It starts with one. And this starting with one is like this pattern of nature that you see everywhere, and that something that we are naturally a part of. This golden ratio basically establishes this point from which everything expands outward into the universe. So we need to make sure that we stay on the path of the light side instead of potentially going down the path of the dark side. So, which direction should you go? It all starts, like I said, with making a choice, and making one solid choice is the very beginning. Now, there is a paradox of choice, and the paradox is that one track shuts options down, but it also opens up a whole range of other options when you finally go down it. So, let's take a look at how this could work, okay? This is about choosing. So the first set of choices is whether you're going to choose that you're not creative, or choose that you are creative and actually own it and embrace it. So let me ask a question, another opportunity for you to actually participate, and I actually want participations, por favor. Sorry, wrong country, but you know. Close enough. Who? You're like, it's nowhere close to Spain or Portugal. It doesn't matter. It's the principle of the thing. Who here, give me a show of hands, who here feels that they are creative or believes that they're creative? That is not bad. About half. Here is something to consider. If you aren't creative, I'm going to try to win you over. Bruce Nussbaum, who wrote Creativity Intelligence, says that creativity is about making connections and seeing patterns. Now, my thinking is a lot of times it's developers who are like, dude, I'm totally not creative, I'm analytical. And so if you thought to yourself, dude, I'm analytical, I'm not creative, just like that, with that voice, and you're thinking, child, please. Or you become a sassy black woman, which, by the way, I offered to be somebody's sassy black woman translator for. Yeah, so if you ever need me to be a sassy black woman translator for you, I do hire out for that. So you'd be like, oh, no, bitches. Yeah, I can do that for you. So if you're thinking, child, please, my answer to you is, yes, you are creative. You are indeed. And if you're thinking that you aren't creative, you are actually experiencing what I call, which I write about in great detail in my book, actually, creativity denial, which is when you think that you aren't creative, that you can't access your creativity, that it's difficult, that being analytical and stuff somehow, closes you away from being creative. And these are from internal fears, which are the inner critic, which I'm going to talk about a lot in the next section as well. Here is something to consider. In the Tibetan language, there is actually no word for creative. The closest word for creative in the Tibetan language is the word natural. Therefore, I'm taking that as a kind of an indication that creativity isn't really about trying to be creative. Creativity is about being who you are. John Cleese says that creativity isn't a talent, it's a way of operating. So like I said, it's not trying to be creative. You don't have to try to be creative. And the other thing is that you also have to realize that trying to be creative is not the same as practicing creativity. Two totally different things. As a matter of fact, the very wise and insightful Yoda says, try not, do or do not. There is no try. So it's not about trying, right? As a matter of fact, somebody else said, Andrew Epstein said, if I try to be creative rather than just accepting that I am, I fail. So this is not about effort. It's more like breathing. It's more like just accepting what's there. And like breathing, it's something that you can build. So how do you build this kind of latent, inherent creativity that you do have, whether or not you believe it or not? It's about getting in tune with the process. It's about facilitating your brain's natural ability to be creative for producing ideas and concepts and doing that well. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with creative frequency, right? When you meet people who are really creative, sometimes it feels like they're kind of operating on this different level, right? They're just like buzzing with all of this like creative vibes, and you're just like, dude, wow, how can I get some of that, right? And it's true, but it's because these people basically listen in. That it's almost like the other side where it's like a radio station, and it's about tuning in to that station, being really receptive and open and bringing in and letting in all that information. So part of the problem that we have is that we've got a lot of white noise. We've got a lot of static, right? And so one thing that I will kind of ask you to do or have you consider doing is use what they call the cocktail party effect, right? And the cocktail party effect is your ability to focus. You guys have all had this, right? You've been at a party. There's a bunch of people. Like this was probably happening last night, where you were like sitting there and you're talking to somebody, you're talking. There's a conversation going on next to you, and at one point you kind of like, oh, there's a conversation. You hear a little bit, and then you focus back on the thing. Same kind of thing. That creativity is there. It is just to like exclude and not listen to all of the static that's there. Another piece of frequency, and frequency has a lot of different meanings, right? So frequency isn't just the waves. Frequency also is occurrence, how often it occurs. So also, it's making a commitment to actually do stuff that stimulates your creativity frequently. And in addition to that, there is practice. So like I said before, trying and practicing are two totally different things. When you practice, you actually work on the skills and you build the skills and you work on it over and over again until you master that skill. As a matter of fact, there's something called deliberate practice, which is the act of practicing something until you get to the point of failure. You learn from that failure, you go back again, you try up to that point of failure until you stop failing at that, and then you move on to the next thing. You make small increments, small changes, you practice to the point of failure. So, here is my challenge to you for going home after this conference. I want to encourage you to start being an idea machine. And I got this idea from an article by James Altucher, who is actually of the same name. Become an idea machine. And what he suggests that people do is that you write down 10 ideas a day. Now, here are kind of some of the structure around this. These ideas do not have to be amazing ideas. They don't have to be earth-shattering. They don't have to be super innovative. They don't have to be things that people have never come up with before. They can be stupid and derivative and lack imagination, but it's the practice of writing down these 10 ideas a day that will really help. So, my challenge to you, get a notebook, just start writing 10 ideas down a day. And I'm going to talk about something a little bit later that might even help structure that even better. So, not the upshot of this, but consider this, that it's not necessarily that by deciding you're creative that you will automatically become creative, right? But without the decision, it certainly will not happen. So, now the upshot is, decide upon creativity, choose it, and then amplify your creative frequency. Next set of choices to have. So, we've got creative or not creative. If you go down the path of creative, that gives you more options and leads you to the next place. Fixed mindset or growth mindset. How many of you are familiar with the book Mindset by Carol Dweck? Nice. So, homework. So, in mindset, Carol basically says that there's these two different kinds of mindset. A fixed mindset is a person who avoids challenges. When obstacles come up, they give up easily. When they think about effort, they think effort is fruitless. They think, oh, talent is something that you just have. You either have it or you don't have it. When criticism comes up, they ignore negative feedback because when they be criticized, it's like their person is being criticized, right? And they are threatened by the success of others. Whereas, if you have a growth mindset, you embrace challenges, you persist in the face of setbacks, you see effort as a path to mastery, learn from criticisms, and you find inspiration and lessons from other people's successes. So a fixed mindset, unfortunately, is really kind of heavy and onerous, right? People think that their basic qualities, intelligence, talents, whatnot, are fixed traits. They can't move. And they spend time documenting intelligence, documenting successes and everything, and really get wrapped up in that. Focused on perfection, talent, ability, accomplishment, comparison. A lot like, actually, inner critic stuff. And the kind of thoughts that people have when they're thinking in a fixed mindset is, maybe I don't have enough talent for this. What if I fail? If I don't try, maybe I can protect my dignity. And it's not my fault, it's somebody else's fault. Right? Again, like I said, inner critic all the way here. And also, people who are plagued with perfectionism often are trapped in the midst of fixed mindset patterns. Whereas, in stark contrast, a growth mindset, people believe that their abilities are something that they can grow upon, that they can develop, that they can change with dedication and hard work, and that brains and talent are just the beginning points, but that you can grow from there, right? So it's focused on learning, willingness to fail, curiosity, expansion, being self-referential and not comparing themselves to others. And it's all about embracing and enjoying learning. So, you're probably thinking to yourself, self? Because that's what I always think when I think to myself. Self, how can I change, or how can one change, because it's obviously none of you guys have a fixed mindset. How can a person change from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? So the first way to do it, or the first thing to do, is to listen for your fixed mindset voice, right? Those examples, like I said, I can't do it, what if oops, sorry. Never had that happen before. Trying to see my slides down here. Oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm like off to the side. I hate it when that happens. Forget it, doesn't matter. Listen to your fixed mindset voice. So listen for that voice of, I'm not sure if I can do it, what if I fail, etc. And when you just realize that your brain is doing that thing, that fixed mindset thing, recognize that you have a choice, that you can go one way or that you can go another. And then you can choose to talk back to yourself, talk back to your brain, because look, you're like, talk to myself? What? Please. Everybody has some kind of chatter going on in their brain, some kind of narrative going on in your brain. So let's all be friends here. We know that you talk to yourself. I actually do talk to myself. It drives my roommate crazy. She's like, wow, really? And I was like, it helps me keep track of things. So, and apparently it's supposed to be a sign of intelligence. Jury's out on that one for me. But talk back to that voice with a growth mindset voice. Say things like, I can learn to do this with time and effort. Think it to yourself. If you're thinking, wow, what if I fail? Then you can think, most successful people have had failure along the way. And, I don't think I should try this. You can be like, look, if I don't try, I automatically fail. And they're like, it's somebody else's responsibility. It's like, if I don't take responsibility, I can't fix it. And actually starting to have this kind of understanding and forgiving way of dealing with yourself. Another step that you can take after that is to actually take growth mindset actions. And so some growth mindset actions are to adopt a beginner's mind. So a lot like children, for all the people who have children, this is probably recent for you. If they started walking, it's kind of amazing to watch a child start walking because they have absolutely no self-consciousness at all. Right? Seriously. They fall and they fall on their little diapered butts. So cute. And then they get back up and they just keep walking and they're so excited. They don't go, oh my God, I fell, and Mom saw it and Dad saw it and Grandma saw it. Like, I'll never walk again. It's going to be awful. They just get up and they keep going, right? So adopting a beginner's mind and so knowing that there's going to be times where you're like, you don't quite get it. And part of the triumph, actually, of achieving something is actually that challenge that you go through beforehand, in my opinion. Another fixed mindset action that you can take is to release the tyranny of the expert. And I love the way that sounds, because when you're in a place where you feel like you always need to be the expert, there's no room for you to be wrong. It's so exhausting, right? You can't be wrong, you can't make a mistake, you can't let other people know that you're trying to work stuff out, and you can't get help, right? So if you're having these moments where your initial reaction to something is always like, I already know this. I do a lot of hair flipping, even though I don't have hair. It's part of the reason I wear long earrings. It kind of gives me something to flip around. So instead of having the initial reaction of I already know this, think, isn't this interesting? And look at it and see if there's something that you can actually learn in it, if there's something about it that you actually don't know so that you can learn something. Another fixed growth mindset action that you can do is to rediscover the familiar. One trick that I actually use in my creativity workshops is I have people look at something that they've looked at a lot. And I have them look at it and try to find a detail that they missed, right? As a matter of fact, a lot of times I like to have people look at the back of their hand, because you know the saying, I know it like the backside of my hand? When's the last time you really actually looked at the backside of your hand? Right? Like, it might have changed since the last time you looked at it. So I have people look at it, really examine stuff and go, oh, wow, oh, I didn't notice that, just to get your brain into the mode of taking in information that you may not be seeing. Another action that you can do is to relearn something from a friend, right? So something that you may think that you already know, but have a friend explain it to you and see if they explain it to you in a different way and that you can get something from that explanation. And then you can also go and actually just try to learn something completely new, something that's completely out of your wheelhouse, and something that you're just like, I never knew that was going to be interesting to me, but in that process of learning, it opened up all of these new avenues in my brain. My personal example of that is that I started learning improv. And so now it's been 2 years that I've been taking improv classes at my local improv theater, and I still have a ton to learn, and it's a lot of fun to actually be in the place of learning something rather than teaching it all the time. There's a study, which I would get the information, except for I don't want to mess with the cursor. But there was a study in 1999 of 143 researchers that asked about creativity, and they said that the ability to learn from experience was actually the number one ingredient for creative achievement. So learning from experience is really important, and people with a growth mindset tend to actually do this naturally, have kind of this perseverance and this resilience that's required to turn challenges into successes. So Benjamin Barber, a buddy, I don't really know him, but I kind of like to think of him as a buddy, says that I don't divide the world into the weak and the strong, or the successes and the failures. I divide the world into the learners and non-learners. So the upshot of this is to approach everything with openness and eagerness and continue to increase your knowledge and to expand yourself. So you chose creativity. Hopefully you're choosing a growth mindset. And so the next step along the way is to choose whether you're going to be blocked or whether you're going to be in flow. So creative blocks are kind of a pain in the butt, right? And they are, I will say that they are unavoidable. You can't be in flow all the time. But creative blocks, and this is what my book is about, is really about fears. The fear of the messy unknown, the fear of being judged, the fear of taking the first step, the fear of losing control. Andy said yesterday morning, Andy's like, what? I did? That we have an unwillingness to take risks for the fear of criticism or failure. And sometimes that keeps us paralyzed and in place. But the thing is that getting to creative flow actually necessitates that you get rid of those fears, that you release those fears, that you work through them so that you can get to the other side. As a matter of fact, the sweet spot is between what you love, what comes easily to you, what pays you well. And I like to think that that has to do with that kind of natural, word natural in Tibetan, and really boils down to what you enjoy, what you're good at, and what makes you feel empowered. Getting you to a place of empowered play, which, unsurprisingly enough, I believe equals flow, right? Now, the thing that's really cool about flow is that flow studies have been done that show that flow is like this amazing process, right? People feel empowered, they feel motivated, they feel stronger, they feel more capable, more confident. People who experience flow more often are some of the happiest people in the world. The other thing that's really cool is that flow actually is at odds, is basically binary, at odds, the opposite of the inner critic. And when your brain is on flow, you have this ability to get more information. You have that cocktail party effect where you actually lower the signal to noise ratio. Your pattern recognition increases, your ability to link ideas together increases, and then you get a whole stream of really, really cool brain drugs. And so flow is really great. And flow basically banishes the inner critic. So that part of your brain, so let's get all neuroscience-y here for a moment. And neuroscience-y is a technical term, by the way. Let's drop some neuroscience, which is when your brain is in that fear place, it's part of the prefrontal cortex, basically kind of shuts everything down. And when you relax and you start being afraid, that part of your brain kind of goes away, kind of shuts down and quiets down, and then your ideas start to flow. Has anybody seen, this is a total aside actually, has anybody seen the TED Talk, Your Brain on Improvisation by Charles Lim? More homework. Yeah, okay, 2 in the back. I wish I had some candies to throw at you or something. So it's really amazing. He actually puts people in an EEG machine, kind of links them up. He has some people playing jazz on actually they're laying down, and they've got this keyboard that they're playing on. He's engineered this thing. And then he also has hip-hop artists. And they did brain scans while people were doing this kind of improvisational music, and it showed that part of the brain, which is the same part of the brain that is the inner critic, just totally quiets down, and that's what actually allows people to get into a flow state and get moving. The other thing that's really cool about flow is they've done studies that show that when you're in flow, afterwards, you have what I like to think of as the flow afterglow, which basically translates into that the effects of flow last for a day to 2 days afterwards. So that means that you actually get back into a flow state more easily, you're more creative, your ideas move better. So then you're probably thinking, this is great, sign me up. How do you reach flow? I have some good news and I have some bad news. Which one do you want first? Bad news, good, because that's what I was going to do. The bad news is that you can't force yourself to get into flow, but you can set the conditions for it. So it's actually the bad news first, but then the good news. So let's talk about setting up the conditions. First thing is to get in touch with your brilliance. So how many of you guys, there was one guy, I wish I could find his face. He probably left already. There was one guy who was sitting like kind of behind me, next to me during Vitali's presentation. And Vitali was like, how many of you are having a horrible time? And, and then he was like, how many of you is the best day of your life? And he was like, me! And I was like, that's so cool. And I was like, this is great that he actually was like in touch with what made him happy and what like really did. So, you're being in touch with your brilliance. Really figure out what resonates with you, what compels you. And when you find that out, just like the guy who was sitting next to me, embrace your superpower. Don't try to downplay it, right? Don't try to like, oh, it's not that important. The thing that's interesting about this that I find is that people tend to downplay the things that they're really good at because it's so easy for them. The thing that is the easiest for you to do that is like breathing, like effortless, that's the thing that you're really good at. How many of you have done something where you were just like, yeah, so I just, I put this thing together and I did this, and everybody's standing around going, what just happened? Right? And you're just like, well, no, it's easy. I just like put this thing together and I did this. That is where your brilliance lies. That's your superpower. I was talking to Hayden, actually Hayden said this in his presentation yesterday, and he said, oh, I did all this stuff, and I was in a design program, and I did this total, FU, project to my thing, and I still got the degree. But when I finally got the degree, I realized that I was more of a writer than a designer, and that's when I started writing. And he said to me this morning, we got lost in the sauce and over breakfast, and he said to me this morning, he's like, I will get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to write because I love it that much. So what's the thing that's going to get you up at 6 o'clock in the morning to do? That's your brilliance. Second thing for getting into flow, have clear goals. If you have clear goals, if you worked on a project where you knew what you were trying to shoot, what you were shooting for, and then the next thing you know, 5 hours passed and you didn't realize it, bam, you were in flow, and it was because you knew where you were trying to go. You may have found some different paths along the way, but you knew where you were going to go. The third thing is to have uninterrupted focus time. That's really important. Now, a lot of you are just like, and I work in an open frame, open plan office, and how can I do that? There are ways. Has anybody seen this article about how to ruin developer productivity, right? And I would actually argue that this isn't just geek productivity. This is like everybody. If you interrupt people, and actually, you were talking about the gentleman in the hat with the bee. You were talking about multitasking, right? And task switching. One of the things that's really hard about multitasking and why it doesn't work is that your brain actually stops and then starts again. When you switch tasks and you try to multitask, you're in the middle of something, your brain is in the process, and then you get interrupted by something, your brain goes, shoop, and then, zoop, and comes back. And that's why you get tired at the end of the day when you get a lot of interruptions and stuff. And that's why your productivity totally plummets. The way people think it is and the way it actually is very, very different. And then you can see here is that when you don't have any interruptions and it's nighttime and everybody's gone, that's when productivity soars. Now, carving out time is not an easy thing. If you have children, families, businesses, other kinds of things. But I will say, I grew up in an environment where my father, down there on the bottom, built experimental aircraft as his hobby. And what he did was, when he got home from work, he went home, he changed all of his clothes, put on his hobby clothes, went into the garage, and was in the garage for hours. And he would be in the garage from 6 in the evening until midnight. And he just carved that time out for him. We were like, well, where's Dad? He's in the garage. Always, right? Now, Probably not ideal for like, having a marriage and stuff like that. But he actually ended up building 3 airplanes in his lifetime. And it was something that he was able to do. He carved the time out. You can carve time out too and just establish rules for people. Also, at work, in a more practical sense, you can instill the headphones rule. Is anybody familiar with the headphones rule? So, headphones rule, if you're not familiar with it, is if you have no headphones on, people can come and talk to you. If you have one headphone on and one off, people can talk to you if you want them to. If you have 2 headphones on, people cannot talk to you. So, you can also instill a headphones rule. And you've probably seen it happening without even knowing that it was a thing, right? You probably have had your headphones on, and people are just like, excuse me, sorry to interrupt, right? And that's what they do. So you can just use that. Know that it's a thing and use that. When you do that, it helps to create the space for ideas, right? Creativity's in progress, don't bother me. The other thing that you can do, 2 more things, is you can make sure that you have a balance of risk and challenge. When people go into a flow state, it's because there's something kind of just out of reach, kind of like that deliberate practice thing I was talking about. Something that's just kind of out of reach that you're kind of reaching for. And that's the risk and challenge part. As a matter of fact, when you walk that line between risk and challenge, you end up being in the flow channel. And when you find that you get out of flow, one of the things you can see is if the challenge was too high and it didn't match your skill level, so you kind of notch it back down to your skill level. Or if it wasn't enough risk or it wasn't challenging enough, then you notch it up and notch up the challenge level. And that's how you can kind of stay in that flow channel. And then the last thing about getting into flow is making sure that you have immediate feedback. So if you don't know, it's kind of like that deliberate practice thing again. If you aren't getting feedback that this is a problem and it's not working, then you can't know how to adjust and change it, right? So if you get immediate feedback, you have that. That's a nice thing about developing. Actually, that's one of the things I really loved about doing front-end development. I loved putting the code in and then hitting the refresh button. Oh, baby, like, it did the thing that I wanted it to do, right? Immediate feedback. So if you have that immediate feedback, you can use that. So the upshot of this, find your flow to dispel fears and experience continuous creative growth. And then finally, the last bit of choices that we have is, are you going to be a taker or are you going to be a maker? So a taker does not have much regard for the shape of the future or their ability to take action on issues that truly motivate them. In other words, they're just kind of doing stuff to get by. And they're just kind of doing what they can to get what they can. Whereas a maker's work is lofty, is characterized by morality, creativity, craftsmanship, purposed problem solving, and they view their work through a lens of service. This comes from an article by Jason Kavnar, Why Developers Should Start Choosing Conscience Over Profit. And he also goes further to say that makers choose their work based on impact and happiness. Now, you're probably already in this place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how you can up-level your makershipness. Another technical term. The first thing is to stay a passionate problem solver. I'm certain that all of you here are here because you are passionate problem solvers. And so think critically, not just about how to do the work, but what work ought to be done. One thing that you can do is you can make bug lists. So this goes back to this 10 ideas a day concept. Make bug lists of things that bug you, things that bother you, things that you look at and you think, this should be changed, this could be better, maybe I can help to make it better. Maybe that's part of your 10 ideas, and gosh, if that's the case, that's an easy 10 ideas to have, right? God, there was that one thing, and then we got into the elevator at the hotel, And Matthias immediately was like, oh my God, usability fail, right? UX fail. He's like taking a picture. He was like, and then the button doesn't work and this, and like, oh, and the sun was on it. You can't see it. What? He said it just like that, too. I'm just mimicking. And so do that and make those bug lists and do those things that there's some things that you can influence, but there are other things that you can't influence, and there's some things that you can. The bug list might give you ideas that will lead you on to something that is something that you can solve. As a matter of fact, I was talking, do you guys know who Adrian Zambronin is? He does UX Bear? No? Anyway, yes, so I met him at the first conference, I think, that I came to in 2013. We had coffee the other day, and he's created this interface, this conversational interface, amazing, actually, where you type in something, it types an answer, you type something else, it types an answer, you're just like, where are these answers coming from? And he created that because he was feeling like UX people didn't have enough resources that were easy and accessible and easy to use and that were conversational and very casual. And so he created this tool. You should go and look it up. It's uxbear.what? It is .com, uxbear.com. So, and that was because there was something that was bugging him, and he decided to try to fix it. Another thing that you can do is to cultivate a healthy disregard for the impossible, right? So there are things that we take absolutely for granted every day, every moment of our lives today that were absolutely unthought of and unheard of 100 years ago, right? I mean, name a few of them. The internet, cell phones, screens, TVs, cars, telephones. I don't remember when telephones came, but still, right? A lot of stuff that we are completely used to that people are like, well, you can't do that. A horseless carriage. They called cars a horseless carriage because they couldn't conceive of getting somewhere without a horse, right? So start to cultivate a healthy disregard for the impossible, because something you come up with that other people are just like, that can't be done, can, and it could be you. One of the last things, be clear on your why. Why are you doing whatever it is that you're doing? And what's your motivation? If you don't have whys, or if your whys don't line up, things can go horribly wrong. So it's important to have whys, because whys also infuse meaning into what you're doing. One of the presentations said that performance is about the user. So it's like, think about what your objectives are. And not just what your objectives are, but whom are you aiming to help with whatever it is that you're doing and whatever it is that you're creating. That line, that leaned over person behind this kid's head, that's me. That's my butt. And this was, I have a friend of mine who started a organization in Miami, Florida called Code Fever, where she helps city youth learn how to do tech and learn how to code and everything so that they can be the creators of technologies instead of just the consumers of technology. And so she has workshops and everything and has people come in and volunteer to teach kids HTML and CSS and then even more higher programming skills. And it's pretty amazing. She knows exactly who she's trying to help. She's trying to help these inner city kids so she can make a big difference. And she's actually been recognized and has been invited to the White House in the United States for this contribution. So who are you trying to help? And then take this kind of incentive, take this motivation, and start to choose bigger, more creative problems to solve. And then finally, don't just do it for yourself. Try to spur creative thinking at scale. So this is a picture of fine people at Pixar. And one of the things that Pixar is really, really famous for is a practice called plussing, which is based on the improv notion of yes and. And so, for example, the story goes that after Toy Story, the making of Toy Story, these fine people got together and had lunch and were chit-chatting and were like, okay, what are we going to make next? And one guy said, let's make a movie about monsters. And the other one said, yes, and the monsters could be afraid of children instead of the children being afraid of the monsters. Yes, and the screams that the kids make can actually fuel the city. Yes, and there can be a little girl that gets into the monster world. And then the next thing you know, by using the yes and construct, they created Monsters, Inc. So when you're in a situation where you're working with other people, even though the culture says that it's okay to say, yeah, but, or no, that's not a good idea, challenge that, support people's idea, plus it. Say yes and add something to it so that other people can add on to what you say, build that, add on to what they say, build that, and then you come up with a whole set of ideas that never would have existed if somebody had just said no. The upshot, make things that matter to both you and others. So, now that we've got this rubric for choosing, let's think about how we will progress. So what do you get through making these sets of choices, right? Now, I say it in a way that it's like super easy and it's super clear, but we all know that life is complex and so are decisions. You've got these two tracks that you can go on, right? By not choosing creativity, by having a fixed mindset, by staying blocked, by being a taker, will take you down a path where your options for work and life and satisfaction are increasingly limited. However, by choosing creativity, choosing a growth mindset, finding your flow, and being a maker, you have, in my opinion, more options. And you can start to steer yourself towards a world and a life of unlimited possibilities. So I like to think of these as guidelines and stars to navigate by that provide clarity in times of doubt and confusion. And clarity brings about purpose, purpose brings about action, and action brings about change. So this is a powerful tool for change. As a matter of fact, we could even consider them as imperatives. Create, learn, flow, contribute, right? Imperatives that we use to guide ourselves and to follow along and to make our lives and to give our lives meaning. And in doing so, we can mobilize this dormant creative confidence, right? This confidence that we would be able to come up with ideas that nobody's come up with before, about believing in your ability to create change in the world around you, and the conviction that you can achieve what you set out to do. We can't predict the future, right? Because the future is full of unknowns, known unknowns, the unknown unknowns that we don't know, the things that we know that aren't unknown. But we do have an alternative. There is an alternative. The best way to predict the future is actually to create it. And like I said earlier, in terms of the web, and probably in a lot of other aspects, we actually are the creators of the future, right? We're master creators, in fact. That's just what we do. So remember, like I was saying earlier, those gifts of designers, of developers, and remember how powerful you really are. And remember, like Una suggested yesterday, that we can kind of create the magic of what the web can be. So hopefully, making choices should be easier. But when you're moving forward, one of the things that you need to do is you need to remember where you've been. Remember this moments of feeling that you're not creative, these moments of fixed mindset that you may have had, these moments of feeling completely blocked and stuck, and just taking what you can get. Andy said yesterday that the decisions that most designers make are based entirely on guesswork. But we've got this great framework now to work with, and so we don't have to guess anymore. We don't have to worry about any of this, and we can also start to release our entrepreneur. If anybody saw Jamie's presentation earlier today, right? Don't wait for permission to do what you need to do. Just start doing this. Start being into this place of being proactive, committed, open-minded, resilient, etc. Respect yourself and also recognize, Aretha, recognize that we are both designers and developers, right? We are designers when we are working through ideas and getting them down, right? And we're developers when we're actually taking those ideas and executing upon them and making them manifest in the world. I think it actually boils down to this. It boils down to love. What do you love? What do you love about yourself? What do you love about the world? And what do you want to make more of? Love is your compass, and I say that creativity is your true north. And by taking those two together, you will start to get to work that is more creatively satisfying. Back to the Fibonacci sequence. All of space and time started with this singularity, started with this one, and expanded outward. And likewise, because we are part of this whole kind of divine unfolding, we are expanding outward just like the universe is, and that we are seeking self-actualization. It's an iterative process. It's not clean, like I said, with the success and everything. But we have something where the choices can kind of flow out from us. Not be these little components, but this kind of flow of choices. So now you have a framework. Andy also said that art direction is the gravity that pulls atoms together. I like to think of creativity as the gravity of your work, the gravity that kind of keeps you grounded, right? So in my mind, the choice is clear. I was talking to Ava, and she said, you know, with creativity, you need to trust yourself and your creativity, and you need to make a leap. So, in my mind, like I said, the choice is clear. You choose creativity, and you see what happens and what flows from that afterwards. Thank you. Thank you. Woo! Okay, couple of things. If you want the slides, there are the slides. I don't know if anybody noticed, but there's been tweets going out this whole time. So there should be a tweet also of the slide URL. Please come and talk to me if you want to talk to me about coming and doing a talk at your company or doing a workshop or doing coaching or whatever. Please come and talk to me about that. And please sign up for the list for my new book, Banish Your Inner Critic. By the way, this is a mock-up. I'm only on chapter 5 out of 11 chapters, so it's not written yet, but it will be done by the end of the year. So please, if you're interested, it's going to be basically talking about how to identify the different forms of your inner critic and how to get rid of them and silence them so that you can let your creativity out and flow in the world. And if you want to contact me, this is how you can do it. And again, wait till I take a picture. Thank you so much. You guys have been great.
How about that? That was such a wonderful end to a brilliant conference. I mean, how well did the opening and closing keynotes bookend each other there?
Almost like we planned it. Yeah,
Does anyone, I mean, my mind is blown. I'm sure yours are. Does anyone have any questions?
And if you want to ask me questions later on at the beer thing, that's totally fine too. Like, we don't have to do it here. But if you do want to ask me a question, that's cool. I can take it.
I think everyone's
my jet lag is worn off, so I'm
fried.
good. Okay. Thank you, you guys. You were great.
Thank you so much, Denise.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure.
Amazing.